I guess call pass, I'll start. Hello, welcome everyone. This is my presentation on the lead drug synthesis of quinolones. So here are my aims. My aim was to make this quinolone here on the left, try to get around 100 mg of it for biological assays. And then once I've synthesized this target molecule, I would want to make derivatives of it to test its different properties. So that's all well and good, but why am I doing this for? What is the purpose of that molecule that I showed you before? Well, it's for American Latin parasite. It's for Chagas disease, and Chagas disease is caused by a parasite called Trypanosoma cruzi. That's its Latin name, and it's if you can see this picture on the right of this Panama child, is one of its telltale symptoms is swelling on the right eye, and it's called Ramona's sign, and it's estimated to actually infect like 7 million people worldwide. So it's actually one of them categorized as one of the neglected tropical diseases. So here, this diagram, I just wanted to show the cycle of the parasite. So it's got 4 stages basically I want you to take out of this, and when I first saw it, I did actually think it was something from like an Alien versus Predator film. It's a mystical, or the first stage of it. When it enters the human, it has the ability to come into tissues such as cell walls or muscle cell walls and multiply through binary fission. And with the previous picture of the child, that's the acute system. Right, if you're able to catch it at the acute time, it's treatable, but with prolonged exposure to the parasite can infect deep heart tissues, intestinal areas of the organs, and even spinal fluid. So it's quite a horrible little thing to deal with if you haven't caught it in its infection stage. So, like I mentioned before, there are treatments for it. What I'm looking to do is to find the drug, a candidate that actually treats in the chronic stage. So I'm trying to prevent all these complications when having this parasite in you for a long period of time. Like, because if you have it more in your system for more than 2 months, it could leave, like, the fatality rate is like 40% for heart attack and then 10% for gastrointestinal complications. And as you can see, these 2 medicines here that already exist, they can't be used against pregnant women because they're quite conformationally flexible, so they have a lot of different unwanted side effects because of their flexibility. They can conform to other active sites and give undesirable effects. So previously in Sussex, there have been 91 extracts, 91 derivatives that have been made, and this has been made by Brian Cox's group, and all of them have kind of, what I want to take from this is that they've kind of focused on changing the C5 position chain. So instead of this chain here, I've got the trifluorocarbon, and it actually shows like really high activity. So it's gone from 0 IC50 values to, a high IC50 value to a low IC50 value, and just increased activity in the sense of trying to eradicate the parasite or the parasite out of the system. So here's the previous synthetic route I took on. I kind of had to optimize this. It starts off with just a cycloannulation, that's the intermediate, then an iodination in the C3 position followed by methoxylation. And previous to me, the yield was 0.13% and only 10 mg was acquisitioned. So at first, when I started this reaction, I studied mechanism. It looked pretty straightforward, like nucleophilic attack at the carbonyl, and then just trying to push that equilibrium position to try and get that shift base in that intermediate stage, and then followed by some thermal energy to get the additional elimination step to form the bicyclic ring system. And this could actually go through an electrocyclization pathway too. So the first step of the synthesis was the cycloannulation that I mentioned on previously. It was quite difficult at first to try and push the equilibrium all the way, but the most optimal I managed to get is the 1-to-1 sign material and intermediate. So here's the NMR. It's not really the most clean NMR, as you'll see later on, but I managed to use the aromatic peaks in the 6 to 7 ppm region to tell the difference between the area underneath the peak curves. So once I got the intermediate, I did a cyclization step. This required this apparatus here, a Dean Stark, very high temperatures. The first 5 attempts were failure, and it was quite a hard part of the project. I nearly threw the towel in, but I kind of thought, you know what, this method is not working, so I'll try different methods. It's completely exhausted that. So I thought, because the last step used methoxylation with a microwave, we'll try using a microwave for the first step by ramping it up so it's sequestered, has enough time to sequester, and heating it in the last 10 minutes to induce that cyclization. So yeah, this is a lot of information, sorry. I just want you to concentrate on entry 4. That was the most optimal out of changing the temperature and the molecular mass of the reagents. I managed to get 3 to 7% yields, but unfortunately this was not the right product. It actually formed the thermodynamic quinolone instead of the kinetic one. So the whole reason for that intermediate step is to try have that imine formed before heating it, but in the microwave it just, one, I don't think the reagents had enough time to react with each other, and two, when they did react, they were forming this quinol 4-on instead of quinol 2-on instead of quinol 4-on. So when the microwave synthesis didn't work, I tried using different solvent systems, because the diaphenol ethyl solvent was so thick, and it felt like even if this crude mixture had some of the quinol 4-on in it, I would be able to extract it out. But again, it just was this black goo, and when I was doing an NMR of it, there was just minimal amounts of the target quinolone I wanted, and bear in mind I had to do 2 more synthetic steps with that small amount. I just thought there's nothing else to investigate in this method. But yeah, that's the additional solvent. I think if I was going to come back to it, I'd use a different reagent rather than the methyl acetyl acetate. So after a long hard cry, I decided to come back to the quinolone synthesis, and I actually tried extending it for 7 to 9 days to give that more time to try and push that equilibrium position to the intermediate. And once I've done that and used the thermal energy to cyclize the reaction mixture, I did a manual purification. So this is from the dark ages, using positive pressure to push through all the solvent and the molecules through a silica base and separating them out in separate test tube vials. My arms were like shovels, mate, like for 2 or 3 days. Forearms were too swollen, but this gave me an opportunity to investigate the concentrations that were optimal to separate the solvent from the side products and the starting material and the product targets, the quinolone. So I finally got the quinolone, which is like amazing. Here is the spectra, like the characteristical doublets are here in the 6 to 7 ppm region, and then the C3 position, which is like important for the next few steps, is there with that singlet in that position there. So, and here's a mass spec. That's the molecular weight of the quinolone, and I kind of realised for future reactions to optimise it, maybe more than 24 to 48 hours is excessive, because there's a tri-alkylated version that was formed, and even though it's only 1.4% yield, it's still 10 to 1 ratio to the starting product, so it's quite significant if like working at those low yields. So once looking at the mechanism, I realised that the electrophilic attack is the bottleneck of the reaction. Just trying to get that thermal energy as high as possible by adding a thermometer into the reaction vessel. So here, this additional elimination step. So I got 11% of that yield from the first reaction, and this next iodination was so much more straightforward. Just nickel succinimide with acetonitrile for 1 hour, and got a much higher yield, so from 115 milligrams of that, and then tried doing the methoxylation, but having problems with trying to get the methoxy group on the C3 position, because it's, instead of using nucleophilic substitution, it's reducing it back to the original quinolone, so the hydrogen's still there in the NMR. And I was using microwave synthesis for this, so my next steps are to try to use glassware instead of microwaves, so I'm just not getting any luck with microwaves at all. So like the take-home message is basically, it's just to, if you're doing a quinolone synthesis, try to use dry reagents like mole sieves, like try to keep it as dry as possible to push that initial equilibrium to the intermediate base, and then replicating those conditions for the cyclization step. So in conclusion, this is my overall reaction. This is the intermediate that was synthesized, the quinolone, at the best yield I got is 11%, the iodination and the methoxylation. So, and luckily enough,
sorry, can I say you're an amazing public speaker?
Oh, cheers, thank you. With the methoxylation step, a couple of days ago I actually managed to synthesize 10 milligrams of the step, so I actually reached the goal near the end of this year, and it was good. It was a good experience. So I want to thank my lab supervisor Andrew McGowan, Ian Crossley for supporting me throughout my darkest time. I'm trying to give up on chemistry, and then Mark and John Spencer for helping me out with the suggestions. Cheers, thank you.
Thank you so much. I have some questions for you.
Yeah.